All right. Welcome to Balticon 55. And this is Podcasting on the Cheap. I am Doc Coleman, steampunk author, and I'm going to be your moderator for this panel. And I'd like to ask each of our panelists to go ahead and introduce yourselves, starting with Hugh.
Hi, I'm Hugh J. O'Donnell. I am the co-host and producer of the Nostalgia Pilots podcast, as well as co-host of Chrononauts Cinema Reviews.
All right. And Keith?
My name is Keith Hughes. I am a science fiction author, and I also have a podcast that's just me by myself called Ramblings of an Undisciplined Mind, which is a quasi-daily podcast.
All right. And last but not least, Wendy.
Hi, I'm Wendy Van Camp. My website is called nowastedink.com. I am a sci-fi author. I am a speculative poet, an illustrator. I'm in the art show currently here at Balticon 55. And I am also a semi-regular panelist on the Sci-Fi Roundtable podcast. And back in the day, I used to be a television producer director, working for companies like Mattel and other places here in Hollywood. Although I kind of, let's just say I'm semi-retired from that. I just enjoy podcasting because it's kind of fun with my background and everything, but I won't ramble. Go ahead.
Okay. And for those of you who are looking at your program and wondering where Jay Smith is, Jay unfortunately is not able to be with us. He's having internet problems, but he hopes to get them solved tomorrow and be here for the rest of the con. All right. So our subject is podcasting on the cheap, but I want to kind of level set the field a bit first by asking, what is it that we mean by podcasting? And I mean that in terms of, are we considering Twitch podcasting? Are we considering doing YouTube streams podcasting, or just the traditional audio files and RSS streams?
I feel like anything that you are recording and then disseminating through the internet that people can either watch or listen to later counts as a podcast.
Okay.
Yeah, I think a number of years ago, it was a much more cut and dried thing. You know, the definition used to be you were sending on MP3 files, they were an RSS feed, blah, blah, blah. But now with, being able to have an app on your phone to access content on YouTube or Twitch or what have you, I think we have to broaden that, because there's a lot of things that are podcast, what we might think of as podcast content, but they don't meet that old standard of what a podcast was.
They're not coming through traditional channels.
Yeah, I actually just think that a podcast is something that's serialized. So it is something that repeats itself over and over, like a video series or something on YouTube. And I think Twitch actually would fit in now too, because it is serialized. And so it doesn't necessarily need to be like it was back in the day, like a radio program, which I remember well.
Right.
Okay. All right. So what are our basic necessities for a podcast? What is it that we need to do in order to have this podcast?
Well, first, you need a concept. And I think if you're starting out as a podcaster, I always recommend you do something that you kind of just speak yourself on a topic and don't necessarily go off and start interviewing and bringing other people in. It just needs to be you and maybe one or two people that you know and who are reliable, who will be there, because basically setting up schedules with lots of other people is very difficult. And if you're new to podcasting, make it easy on yourself. Have a concept that you can do yourself. Find a topic that you are impassioned about that you can speak about. And the rest is just technical stuff after that.
Yeah. One thing that I know I've heard T. Morris, I've heard T. Morris talk about this is that, you know, give yourself some practice time. You know, record 3 or 4 episodes that maybe you aren't going to release, and just to kind of, because you have to get used to things when you're podcasting. You have to get used to hearing, you know, because you usually have to do at least some level of editing to it after the fact. So you got to get kind of over that squeaky feeling of hearing yourself in the headphones and things of that nature, and just get comfortable talking in front of a microphone. If that's, you know, if that's all that's front, or in front of a video camera and microphone. So a good part of it is just kind of acclimating yourself to this different environment where you're trying to sound like you're talking to a person, but you're really just talking. It's just you and some sort of a machine.
That's true.
Right.
Anything else to add, Hugh? We pretty much covered it.
Well, I think that, you know, you do need to start out with, you know, what you're going to do, and also, you know, how you're going to say it. So you definitely want to prepare for it before you start podcasting. Maybe give yourself a bit of a script, even if it's a topic you feel very familiar with. It is helpful to, you know, familiarize yourself with what you're going to say, even if it's just like a broad outline. You do want to sort of go in ready to talk, and that'll make things go smoother, especially when you're doing your first editing and you have to edit out 10 minutes of ums for every 20 minutes of content.
And there are things you can do to help in the editing process. When you're a beginner, just get on the microphone. I totally agree with that. But you want to maybe learn to add some spaces between your ideas when you talk, because these become natural edit points. And you have that pause of silence where when you're editing, you can just pop right in there, make a cut, and remove certain sections. And it can sound very natural that way. I know that when I do public speaking, I just naturally have these pauses in my voice now. And I think it's because, you know, with my background, I've been kind of trained to do this when I do speaking. And it makes the editor's job a lot easier. And the editor is you. You want to make the job easy on yourself.
Well, you sort of built in a natural cadence to it.
Yes.
Okay. So we've kind of been overlapping into the area of podcasting 101, which is fine. But because this is podcasting on the cheap, I was thinking more in terms of what is it that you need to do in order to deliver a podcast, to take it from you having your idea, sitting down with your crew and with your script, and taking it from there and making it into a podcast that someone can subscribe to. Because these are the pieces that we were trying to do with a minimal budget.
Well,
okay.
Go ahead, Hugh.
So the two things you need are, you need a way to record and a way to edit. And both of these are, in these modern times, tools that you can have for free on pretty much any computer that you're working on. So you need a computer of some kind to start with, and a device to record. But as far as the software you need, you can record from Skype. You can record directly to your computer. Most computers have editing software built in, and for those that don't, there is Audacity. So you can start working with pretty much nothing but your computer.
Okay.
Any other aspects?
Well, I actually want to bring up something. We all many of us own these little things.
Yep.
And, you know, a smartphone has a microphone in it. It's portable. You can take it anywhere. And there are free apps to do recording right in your phone. And if you want to do a video podcast, a vlog, You can record yourself here. As a poet, I often record myself just with my phone, and that way I can speak and I can speak and be seen. And I send it to whatever program I happen to be invited to, and that's fine. You don't have to be fancy with a fancy camera. You don't have to have these expensive microphones. I mean, I do own a few. As you can see in the back, I have my little narrator microphone, my Blue Yeti, but you don't have to do that to podcast. The ideas of what you present are actually more important than the equipment. If you wait until you have expensive equipment, you're not going to ever get the podcast done. So use what you have on hand. And as time goes by and you gain confidence in yourself, you can upgrade at that point. But if you have good content, people are going to come and they're going to listen. So if you have nothing else, use your phone. It's there, it's available, and pretty much everything you need is on your phone. And most of the software or the apps are free to do it. So that's my main thing. I mean, I've been a equipment hound most of my life. And, I used to work professionally. I was used to working with equipment that were tens of thousands of dollars. And I had this high expectation for sound because, I was working in broadcast quality work for most of my early experience. And so when I started podcasting, I was like, I didn't want to do it. I felt cryptid. I just didn't want to get started because it wasn't quality. But in retrospect, that was wrong. I should have just gone forward and done it with what I had on hand. And as I grew more proficient, and as hopefully I got more budget with listeners, because a lot of people do make money with their podcasts.
Right.
Then you can reinvest in your equipment at that point.
We're still talking about starting out, making a minimal investment, and if you find it's something that you really love and you really want to pursue, and you want more quality, then you can find the money to invest in greater equipment.
I agree with
that. Do you have any other takes on this?
Well, I did just that. I mean, I had this little Danzig clip MP3 player, which was about the size of a postage stamp, and that's what I first used. I would clip it to my shirt, and I actually recorded in the car. So it's not going to be a great recording because I was recording it on my commute, so you had road noise and stuff like that. And if I listen to it now, it would make me cringe. But I did that for a while, and I switched to a couple of devices. And I was once I get into it, I was able to get better, make that sound better, and also, like Wendy said, as I was going to continue to stick with it, I said, well, I want to invest a little bit and go ahead and get a digital recorder that's going to be better than the little condenser mic on the Sansa clip was. Phone technology has come a long way since the early days of podcasting, and video especially, but I think also the microphone quality for sound is much improved than what we used to see 10 years ago. So like Wendy says, your phone's a good option. I listen to a regular podcast today that is recorded on somebody's cell phone. So I think that's a good way to go. And back when we were kind of in the heyday of podcasting, there used to be a real I don't even know what the word is, but we used to think that the sound quality had to be perfect, like we were competing with FM radio or something like that. And so there was almost a bias that if your sound quality wasn't 1,000% perfect, then you shouldn't even be releasing that stuff. But I feel like that has loosened over the years, and that people realize that it really doesn't matter if you hear somebody's dog bark in the background, because that's life. People have dogs, they have cats, and sometimes you're sitting down to record and the guy next door starts his lawnmower. You can't control that. And most people just ignore it because they're hearing the same thing out of their windows. So, you know, we used to have this idea that you had to be in a pristine, ultra quiet environment, and you had to have the best sound quality in the universe, like you were at NBC Studios someplace. And,
we were all trying to compete with studio sound, and most of us just weren't set up for it.
And, you know, honestly, I think there's an immediacy when you have some of this outside noise. It makes it seem more real, and that you are like with the person that's listening. They don't necessarily go to a podcast to get the quote unquote TV experience. They can go turn on the TV for that. They're coming to you because you have something unique to say, or they come because they like your personality. And, you know, you don't have to be quote unquote perfect to convey that.
Yeah, and a lot of that really depends on the concept for your podcast, because if you have a concept where you're out in the world, then incidental sounds are just incidental sounds. If you're trying to do something very, very structured and polished and professional, then maybe you want a little bit better sound quality, but
well, I do know that. Oh, I'm sorry.
Well, I'm reminded of
interjecting here. But I just wanted to say that I have been starting to do book narration. And for that, I have had to invest in better equipment, because the audiobook companies have very exacting standards. I'm probably going to have to rent out a sound room to do, even though I'm doing the voiceover myself. And that's why I bought the Yeti mic, because it's a little bit stepped up. I have one of those sound studio things you clip on your mic stand, and it surrounds your microphone to help with the sound quality. So, but I will go through these extra steps because I know I have to. But if I was just doing, you know, like when I do the Roundtable podcast with my co-hosts, we just do it through a Zoom, and we just sit there and we rap and we record it, and our editor cleans up all the bad stuff we might say, so to speak. But yeah, it's you don't really need to do so much quality unless there's a reason for it. And for narration, that is a reason. But for a regular podcast or to be on YouTube or whatever, you can get by. Just, you know, there are, yeah, go ahead.
I'd like to get to, we're starting to get some questions in from the audience. I'd like to get some of those. So basically we've established if you listen to podcasts already, either on a computer or on a smartphone or on a tablet, you probably already have a device that's capable of doing the recording. Catherine Kane has asked, what kind of apps can you use for podcasting on a smartphone? And I think what we're referring to here is for recording audio when you're using your smartphone. Now I know
people I've doing it, I think, are probably just using a voice memo app, maybe even one that came with their phone. I don't know the fancy that people are using for that.
I believe if you've got an iPhone, there's a built-in voice message or voice memo app that will let you record audio. Has anyone played with anything else?
Well, I don't have an iPhone. I use Android, and there is a voice recorder app on there. There's one called Otter that I use, and what's nice about Otter is it's actually designed for conferences. And if you're doing an interview, it'll actually separate out the two voices for you in the recording. But what's nice about Otter is not only does it record fairly decently with the audio portion, it'll also transcribe it. So if you want to do transcription notes, you can do that. And I believe it's 600 hours per month is free. So unless you're doing huge novels or something, it's a free app to use. And that's OTTR, Otter. Okay.
And we're talking just podcasting here, not narration.
Oh, I'm sorry. My television background comes through. I apologize.
So Hugh, you had something you wanted to suggest?
Yeah, I was just going to follow up that, yeah, most phones come with a voice recorder or have easy to find open source voice recording soft apps that you can download. Just sort of look around online, and you should be able to get a good one.
Yep. And I see from the chat, our host report recommends using a program for the Android called TapaTalk. I'm not familiar with that one, but that's another one.
And for doing interviews, you can actually record interviews through Skype.
Yeah.
Which is what I use for most of my actual recording these days, because everyone on my podcast is in different countries or different states.
Okay. All right. The other thing that I'd like to point out is if you've got a phone that's capable of recording video, you have a phone that's capable of recording audio. You can separate the audio out from the video when you get around to editing. And most phones these days do that with the built-in software. All right. So once you've recorded your software or recorded your audio in whatever form, and you want to go and do your editing, what kind of applications are we looking at there? Are we still needing a computer, or do we have options on mobile devices now?
I'm still using a computer.
Okay.
So my process is I strip out the audio from my video using MPEG Stream Clip, and I run that through post-processing software, which is a tried and true program that I've been using since way back in the day called Levelator, which is still going. And that cleans up wave audio so that you can and levels noises, and it's very good as long as you're don't have music already in the background.
Well, I guess I'm old school. I'm still using Audacity.
Yeah, I am too. I've been using Audacity for more than 10 years, and it does everything I need it to do. And that's not I'm using the PC-based Audacity. I think there's a Mac version. I don't know about Linux, but
Audacity is kind of great because it's on Mac and PC, and it's got the same function set, and it's completely free.
The only difficult thing about Audacity is destructive. So you do want to make sure you have a backup of your audio, because you're going to, anything you delete will get fully deleted. I use Reaper, which is available for Windows and Mac. It's not a free program, but it is deeply discounted for students and individuals. It might cost you about between $30 and $60.
Okay, and thank you from Bill in the audience, who mentions there is a Linux version of Audacity as well.
Hey, Bill.
There was at one point.
I have to admit that when I have to go edit audio, I'm a Mac person. I still use GarageBand, which is still free. And I know I have tried Reaper, but honestly, I wasn't producing enough audio to switch over to it. And part of it was because at one time I tried to get my wife to do my audio editing because she's got better ears than I do, and she didn't want to deal with Reaper. But a lot of times there are free editors out there. Okay, so we've recorded our audio and we've pulled it into our editor and we've gone through it. We've edited out the mistakes. We've added whatever post-production we feel like doing, and we want to render it into an uploadable file format. Do we need anything?
I did want to bring up before we go further in the process, it's very important to get, like I call it, a B-roll of your audio, another 30, 40 seconds of the room noise, and keep that as a separate file, because sometimes you need to fill the quote unquote silence, but you don't want to have the silence, because it'll people will notice that. You run this B-roll in between those small little sections, and it evens out your sound for you. So what I always recommend for people to do is don't forget that B-roll, no matter where you are, because every place you record is slightly different. Make sure you take that 30 seconds of just quietness or whatever the surrounding sound is where you are, and have it in your back pocket. Sometimes you don't need it, but if you do, you'll be glad to have it. And sorry, Doc, I'm just jumping in there. So anyway,
no, actually, that's actually a good point. Is it does help to remember to I always heard it referred to as room tone. Is to record between 10 to 30 seconds of just silence, and I do it for every recording, because even if you're back in the same room, you've changed. How you're sitting has changed. It's going to affect the dynamics of the sound. And I know Reaper was great, had a great tool for taking that tone and removing room noise from you. You would take that sample and it would remove that, and it would drop your noise floor way down. Another technique that I learned was throw that room tone in a separate track and copy it all the way through. And when you're done editing, if you've edited parts where you've created those gaps like we're talking, it fills in.
Okay, mine is emerged.
But even where you have other edits, it helps smooth it out so it all sounds connected.
Right.
Let's see. So do we want to talk about any other hardware and software for post-processing?
I don't know. I'll leave it up to you guys.
Those are the 3 programs I use. So I've covered my process.
Okay.
I guess maybe the only other thing I would bring up, if I could real quick, is Mp3 tags are kind of important. This is metadata that is on the MP3 file or even a video file, MP4, or what have you. And I use a free program called Mp3 Tag. And that enables you to have control over those. So you can do things like put the title of your podcast, put your name, copyright information, things of that nature on your files easily.
Okay. There's one other that I have used in the past, and now that I go to talk about it, my brain wants to abandon me on what the name of it was. It's a tool similar to Levelator in that it helps to balance out to balance out the levels in your files, and I can't remember it. It's a web-based tool. I believe it's called AudioFile. Now this is going to bug me that I can't remember this. I thought I had it. All right. So we've gone and recorded, we've edited, we've created our MP3. So now we need to get it out to the world. Okay. And we're still trying to do this on the cheap. So we can't have everyone in the world connecting to our computer. So that means we need hosting somewhere.
Well, I know when I was doing my own podcast, I did Libsyn, although I did have to pay for the hosting with them. It was very reasonable. It was, back then it was $10 to $15. I'm sure it's more now. But I found them very reliable, and they actually created a blog that my podcast went on, and each blog entry had the MP3 file embedded in it. And from that point, it would send it everywhere for me. But since then, I have learned of a thing called Anchor. And the podcast that I'm involved with right now uses Anchor as the distribution point. And it goes everywhere. I mean, it hits iTunes, it hits Stitcher. Any outlet that you need to hit, the major ones, this Anchor system seems to access, and it's free, which blows my mind away considering how much they offer. And maybe it won't be free forever, who knows? But for now, it is free, and I find it's very full featured. And if you're looking to do something very inexpensively, it's a great way to go. I believe it's only audio. I don't know if they do video or not. I've only had experience with them doing audio. Somebody may correct me on that. But I do recommend it. It's a good system.
Okay. Anybody else have any?
Now, what I use for hosting, yeah, I've got a different solution that I use that's also free, which is my favorite price. I actually store my files on archive.org, the Internet Archive. I've done that. I'll give you a little bit of a cautionary tale when it comes to using a free service. I was using, when I initially started my podcast, I was using a different free service, and after 2 or 3 years, they went under. They folded up, closed the doors. So I ended up switching to Internet Archive, and I've been there ever since. It's been quite a number of years now. So far they've been pretty stable. And it doesn't give me a lot of the bells and whistles that Wendy was just describing. So I have my own blog. What Internet Archive does give me is the ability to link to my files. It gives me a little player widget that I can put on my blog post. And then what I do from that, so that goes on my website, and then I use another service that is still hanging around out there. Surprisingly, I'm surprised Google hasn't shut it down, because it is a Google product called FeedBurner. And I will use FeedBurner to generate an RSS feed. And then I can use that to send it to Apple, or to send it to, I think I'm on Apple and Stitcher with that. It sounds like Wendy's is kind of more of a one-stop solution, whereas mine is a bit more old school and manual to do the same kind of thing.
Now, Keith, is your system similar to SoundCloud, or is it different than that? Because SoundCloud hosts your things.
I'm not certain. Because the Internet Archive, it's really just meant to be a place to put stuff. So like I upload an MP3, and it will take it on its system, and it will provide just a web page on. So you go to archive.org and find my episodes, and you could play it there. And all I do is really link to that file. So I use this little player app that I can embed in my blog post. That I post to my website. And whereas I think things like SoundCloud and Podbean, they're not only acting as a host, but they're also giving you that blog, kind of like what you were describing with Anchor.
Interesting.
I actually go through WordPress, which is a little more expensive, but it handles the domain and all of that part as a part of that, and it does host up to like 15 gigs, which is pretty good for a podcast without too much trouble. And that's about $90 a year.
Is that WordPress.com?
Yes.
Okay. For those who aren't familiar, WordPress.com is WordPress's own site, and WordPress.org is where you can go for support for your own WordPress instance, which you have to set up on your own hosting. And I want to point out something that Brett Glass posted to us in the chat. Brett has made the claim that the Internet Archive engages in wholesale piracy and copyright infringement. So he does not support or use it. I honestly don't know about that.
It's kind of a thorny issue because they have been sort of copyright neutral on a lot of stuff. And there were some people who were archiving audiobooks through them that did not have the copyright for them, and they were not enforcing it, and they were sort of calling themselves a library. And it's all murky, but sort of go with your gut.
They're posing themselves as a storage service so that if somebody's going to use it for nefarious purposes, they're not going to take a part in it. Okay. So you kind of have to guard your own stuff, but okay, that's different. All right. So we've recorded, we've edited, we've got some place to put the files up there. Now, a lot of you mentioned that you're using various bits of hosting that will go ahead and distribute your files on a feed. If you're having to build your own feed, I believe Hugh, you mentioned FeedBurner. I'm sorry, Keith mentioned FeedBurner. Hugh mentioned WordPress. Got it backwards. Is that pretty much it? Are we done? Do we now have a podcast?
I would also say after it's in the can, you've got to market it, because the people you want to reach, you need to let them know that your content is available. And once you get enough of them, then you can actually start doing your revenue streams. So, which, it takes time to build all this. So you need to set up a Twitter support account so you can make announcements when your podcasts come out. And there's ways to automate this, like with WordPress, because my blog happens to be there. And I remember seeing they had added podcasting to it, and it slipped my mind. But yeah, you can do it there. But they also automatically will, like if you do a post with a podcast in it, they automatically distribute announcements all over the place, and you can set it up to do it automatically. But you should also be a little more hands-on. You should have an Instagram account. You should have the Twitter. You should have a Facebook group or a Facebook page. And every time your podcast comes out, you need to make sure that things post to it. And there are ways to automate this. It's not like you're going to have to sit there and type, for 3 days just to get everything out. You set up these automated systems to handle it for you. And it becomes very manageable. But it does take time to set up. It takes some know-how. You'll have to learn. But you really do need to know about marketing and getting the word out. Just because you put up a podcast doesn't mean people are going to come. You got to work to find your listeners.
Guys, any other comments about getting the word out, getting attention, getting listeners?
I find that it's a good thing to try and connect with other podcasters who are sort of in your area. I have sort of swapped promos with other sort of media focused podcasts like Nutty Bites and places like that. So sort of be aware of the community, join Discords, that sort of thing, Twitter streams.
Yeah, I can't speak to Twitter.
I'll try.
Oh, sorry.
And connect with people or other people who are doing the same thing you are, and find ways to sort of share your audience, because a lot like books, your audience isn't just doing one and going on. They're gonna want more content.
I agree.
Okay.
The other thing I'd point out is if you're doing real serialized content, like a story or something of that nature, where you're planning on releasing it weekly, make a bit of a buffer for yourself. You record 4 or 5 episodes so that you aren't necessarily, I'm recording it on Wednesday to try to hurry up and edit it on Thursday to release it on Friday, because that's a great way to just burn out your brain.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's funny. I'm actually at a point where I'm booking almost a year in advance now because of that. I want everything in the can. And I'm speaking my blog at this point, not necessarily podcasting. But yeah, it's really nice because, you know, sometimes we go on vacation or sometimes we get sick. And the audience doesn't always consciously know that. I mean, they probably, if you're sick, they'll probably feel sorry for you. But if it happens enough, they're going to leave. But if you build yourself a buffer of maybe a couple of months, 5, 6, maybe even 10 episodes, and have them all booked ahead. So if you need that time off, or you feel really burnt out and going, oh, I just can't do another topic or whatever, you can take a week or 2 off because everything's in the can and it's moving along. Everything's automated.
Well, if you're doing a podcast that really depends on evergreen content, you can do that. If you're doing reviews of the latest tech or pop culture or politics or anything that deals with current events, that's not an option. Yeah. But what is an option is to set seasons for your podcast. So that you've got set times when you're taking time off in the podcast, and let your audience know when you're going to be back. There are a number of successful podcasts that have done stuff like that, modeled from television that we're all familiar with.
Good idea.
One more thing that I wanted to ask. This is one of those panels that I've been doing for years, and I remember back in the day, one of the problems was not just, okay, you've got your podcast out on the cheap. Now the world has discovered you, and millions of people have come to download your episodes. And your host is coming after you saying, you said you just had a tiny little podcast. Now there's all these fees. You need to pay us thousands of dollars in bandwidth fees. That was definitely a thing a number of years ago. Is bandwidth still a concern?
I think most of the services, are they not unlimited supposedly? But if you are having such huge bandwidth, I think eventually they are going to come with their hand out. But on the same token, if you have that many viewers, you should be able to charge for the podcast. You should be able to get sponsors at that point. It's back to marketing. I hate to keep saying it that way, but you got to get sponsors for your show at that point because it will cover the costs of everything. But you know, when we're talking about on the cheap, and if we're just starting out, I hate to say it this way, don't expect runaway success right at the beginning. You know, if you have a couple hundred people, that's really good. I have heard of a lightning striking a few people here and there. I remember there was a podcast done by a priest, and he was doing Star Wars podcasts, even though he was a Catholic priest. And eventually, let's just say the church kind of quietly told him he better knock it off because you could put your time to other uses. So eventually he was moved to a parish, and I understand he finally took over a lot of the radio contact stuff for the local church in his country. But boy, talked about success, but his success was in Star Wars.
Yeah. And
but
there are other...
There's always a balance, though. There's always a balance.
There are other options if you do have a large audience that you need to accommodate in those ways. Two of the big ones at this point are Patreon and Ko-Fi, which are crowdfunding options that allow you to sort of get your audience to support you as well as give them little bonuses for doing that. But that's a whole other topic for a different panel.
I agree. Patreon, I've heard good things and bad things, and it's a whole lot of extra work to add in a Patreon account. I mean, and with very little return at the beginning. But I have seen some people use their Patreon to support their projects, be it a book, be it a comic strip, be it a podcast. and they have used that to leverage income for themselves enough to support themselves. So it can be done, but again, it takes a lot of work, and I would recommend reading up on the subject before you just jump into it, because it is rather complex. But you know, podcasts on the cheap, don't be afraid. Just jump in, the water's fine.
All right. I'd like to thank our audience for their questions. We're running a bit out of time, so if you have additional questions that you'd like to ask the panel, some of us are going to be going over to the Discord room, Pride of Baltimore 2. So if you care to join us there and continue the conversation, you're welcome to. So any last thoughts? Where can people find your stuff if they want to see how you do it? Hugh?
They can find everything I do over at hughjodonnell.com. My podcast, Nostalgia Pilots, which is a 90s Gundam fan cast, is at nostalgiapilots.com. And Chrononaut Cinema Reviews, which is a classic movie podcast, is hosted at skinner.fm.
All right. And Keith?
You can find everything that I do, my podcast, Ramblings of an Undisciplined Mind, and also my novels at penslinger.com. I'd like to announce this book, which is the third book in my time travel adventure series, was just released today. And actually, the first book in the series is now on sale for 99 cents. So if you want to learn more about that, penslinger.com, just like it sounds.
All right. Congratulations on the new book. Wendy?
I'm Wendy Van Camp. You can find me at nowastedink.com. The podcast I'm involved in is called the Sci-Fi Roundtable podcast. I have links to all the episodes on my website, but you can find it on Anchor. And it's in pretty much it's been distributed to just about every podcast outlet. Just type in Roundtable or Sci-Fi Roundtable podcast. I'm also an author and a poet. My books are available to be found on my website. I hope to see you there.
All right. And I am Doc Coleman, steampunk author, and you can find all about my books at doccoleman.com. And if you're interested in my podcast, which has been sitting fallow for a few years, that's theshrinkingmanproject.com. That was a podcast I did about my weight loss journey, which is somewhat interrupted right now. But I'd like to thank everyone for their time and attention, and hope we will see you over in the Pride of Baltimore Discord room. Thank you.
Thank you.